The Life and Acts of St. Patrick by Jocelin. Chapter 71. The dead are raised up, the king and the people are converted, a fountain is produced, and tribute promised. The divine providence bestoweth on this transitory world the desire of letters, to the end that the human race, which when death arrives cannot long continue in the memory, may through distant ages preserve the record of great events, and recall them as if passing before their eyes. Therefore do those things appear to me very worthy of remembrance which were done by Patrick, the illustrious preacher unto the Irish nation, the holy prelate, who, by the grace of God, in his evidences, his miracles, and his virtues, became the conqueror of the old enemy, even to the gathering together the people of Ireland and her kings, that they might serve the Lord, and at length he came unto the noble city which is now called Dublinia. And it was inhabited by the Norwegians and by the people of the Isles, having been conceded by the King of Ireland unto the dominion of the Queen, who was the daughter of the King of Norwegia, and in course of time was it one while allied to, and other while warring against, the kings of Ireland. Hither St. Patrick coming, found the city defiled with the abominations of idols, and unknowing of the true Creator. And he who burst asunder the gates of death and of hell smoothed the path for his servant, for the king and the people, who erewhile had said unto the Lord, Depart thou from us, we will not the knowledge of thy ways, so cast down were they, so saddened with weeping and with lamentation, that all memory of their wonted fierceness, all their barbarous rudeness, and all the pride of their idolatry, were utterly subdued. Wretched was the spectacle on that day. The twin hope of the kingdom, the delight of the city, the solace of the old, the companion of the young, the son of the king of Dublinia, lay in his chamber dead, and his sister, who had gone to bathe in the neighbouring river, had that day perished in the midstream. And a tumult arose through the whole city, and the funeral rites of the king's son being wholly neglected, all ran confusedly to the shore, some, not even casting off their garments, plunge into the river, some dive into its lowest depths, and others sail down the course of the tide, lest haply the body of the royal damsel might thitherward be hurried down. But they who had gone out to seek beheld in the water the damsel lying down, even as one sleeping. They delay not, they raise the royal maiden from the stream, they bear her unto the chamber of her brother for her obsequies, and, according to the superstition of the pagans, the tombs are prepared. And a rumour gathers in the palace that he, Patrick of Ardmachia, who in the name of the unknown god had already raised many that were even dead, had on that day arrived in the city. This the king hearing rejoiced mightily, and he caused him to come where his two children lay, and, being already full of faith, he promised that if God at the prayers of the saint would restore the children of his age, he and all his people would worship him. And all the nobles confirm the promise of the king, and the whole city yearneth toward the faith, so that the children may but be revived. Then the saint, beholding the gain of souls which was there prepared for him, poured forth his prayers, and in the sight of the king and of the people restored to life the royal children, and they, being made the assistants unto the faith, rising again in their bodies, assisted in their father and in the people the resurrection of souls. And this king was called Alphinus, and his son was called Coha, and his daughter Dublinia, and from her the city received its name. And he and all his people, rejecting their idols and all the abominations of the devils, were converted unto Christ, and were baptized at the fountain of St. Patrick, at the southern side of the city, which the saint, striking the earth with the staff of Jesus, had caused to arise, to the increase of the faith of the believers, wherefore did the saint offer there the sacrifice unto salvation, and there, even to this day, is honour and reverence paid St. Patrick and his successors, the primates of Ardmachia. And from that time the king Alphinus and all the citizens of Dublinia vowed themselves and all their posterity to the service of St. Patrick and the primates of Ardmachia, and builded one church near this fountain, and another near the Church of the Holy Trinity, and in the city westward of the Archbishop's palace. And they appointed a tribute unto St. Patrick their patron, which was unto the Archbishop of Ardmachia from every merchant ship a sufficient cask of wine or of honey, a hook of iron, or a measure of salt, from every tavern a vessel of mead or of ale, and from every shop a gift of shoes, or gloves, or knives, or combs, with many gifts of such kind. And on that day the king and his nobles each offered unto him a talent of gold, but the people offered even as they could, the which did Patrick, the poor in Christ, give unto the poor, having retained a part unto the building of churches. Then blessed he them with the blessings of Jacob the patriarch, and of Moses the servant of God, like unto the age and spiritual bearing of whom he appeared, prophesying, and praying, if their deeds agreed with their words, that they might be unconquered and fortunate, but weak and unhappy if ever they falsified their vows. Which plainly was proved when this people, becoming proud and regardless of the blessing of the saint, neglected to pay the appointed tribute. Chapter 72. Of the sentence pronounced on Murinus. And the saint having blessed and bidden farewell unto the inhabitants of Dublinia, then by the power of his miracles confirmed in the faith, preparing himself for the like work, set forward on his journey. And he came unto a neighboring town, which is now called the Castle Crook, where a certain infidel named Murinus governed. Him did the saint desire to lead into the path of life, but this son of death, hearing the fame of his virtue and of his wisdom, which he feared no one could resist, absented himself from the saint, even as from a fierce enemy. And the saint required him that he would at the least give unto him of his abundance, but he, concealing himself in an inner chamber, required him that he would at the least suffer him to sleep. The which commands being of each oftentimes repeated, the saint, at the inspiration of the Spirit, understanding him to be a child of perdition, exclaimed, let him sleep, nor until the day of judgment let him awaken or arise. Then the saint departed, and the wretched man sank into the sleep of death. Thus when the sleeper, covered with the darkness of unbelief, refused to awake at the heavenly voice which called him from the dead, that he might be illuminated of Christ, he descended into the dark grave, there to remain forever covered with the darkness of death. Therefore, even to this day, it is among the Irish a frequent imprecation on a feigned sleeper, mayest thou sleep, as at the word of St. Patrick Murinus slept. Chapter 73. Foylge is punished with a double death, and the deceiving fiend is driven out of his body. And in LXXIX was a certain wicked idolater named Foylge, who was an eminent adversary of Christ, so far forth as he was able. This child of Belial frequently sought occasion to lay on Patrick, the anointed of the Lord, his impious hands, for to him it was very grievous not only to see but even to hear the saint. To this inveterate malice was he urged, for that the man of God had destroyed the aforementioned idol Ciancroithi, unto the abominable worship whereof he was especially bound. But when he could not effect his wicked purpose, he one day attacked the charioteer of St. Patrick, who was named Odranus, for he seized him sitting in the chariot, and strangled him, so that by the one act of blood his fury might be the more fiercely excited toward another. And the saint, wounded in his heart, cast the weapon of his malediction on this child of hell, who, pierced thereby, even at the moment breathed out his soul into the infernal regions. Of some it is said that Odranus, foreknowing the servant of Satan to be intent on the death of the saint, obtained that in his stead he might on that day hold the reins. And this he did, earnestly desiring to lay down his life for the saint, lest, so bright a lamp being extinguished, the people of Ireland should again walk in darkness. And the saint beheld his soul borne into heaven by the angels, and placed in the seat of the martyrs. But the old enemy, entering the dead body, showed to all a false and feigned Foylge, as if revived unto life, and dwelled therein as returned to his possessions and to his people. And after some days, as Patrick was passing nigh unto the dead man's dwelling, he called unto him certain of the family, and asked where Foylge was, and they answered that he was then within in the house, when the saint replied, the soul of Foylge, for that he unjustly slew my chariot driver, God justly judging and vindicating my cause, hath gone cut of his body, and descended into hell, but Satan, to the delusion and the seduction of mankind, hath entered into his corpse, and occupieth it as his own proper vessel. Then the saint forbade Satan that in that vessel he should longer abide, or deceive mankind with so wicked a phantom. And forthwith, at the command of the man of God, the deceiving spirit quitted his habitation of clay, the which, covered with worms, and raising horror and offence to all, was carried into instant sepulture. Nor let it be wondered that the devil should show himself in the visible form of his accustomed instrument, the God permitting whose judgments are an abyss, but rather let him be feared who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Chapter 74. Of the saint's prophecy concerning the kings of Momonia. And the saint, going out of LXXIX, journeyed prosperously forward into the country of Momonia. And the king thereof, who was named Oengus, met the holy prelate, rejoicing and giving thanks in the exultation of his heart, as on that day occasion was ministered unto him of joy and of belief, for that in the morning, when he entered the temple to adore his idols, he beheld them all prostrate on the ground. And so often as he raised them, so often by the divine power were they cast down, nor could they stand upright, but continually were they overthrown. And as Dagon could not stand at the approach of the Ark of the Testament, so neither could the idols stand at the approach of St. Patrick. And he may truly be called the Ark of the Covenant, who in his pure heart, as in a golden urn, bore the manna of heavenly contemplation, the tables of the heavenly law, and the rod of the heavenly discipline. And the king brought him, with great reverence and honour, unto his palace in the city of Kassel, because his mind and his eye had long time longed for him, by reason of the manifold miracles which he knew had been worked by the saint. And at his preaching the king believed in the Holy Trinity, in the name of which he is regenerated in the healing water of baptism. And after he had blessed the king by touching his head, at his earnest and devout entreaty the saint pierced his foot with the point of the staff of Jesus. But the king, receiving his blessing with ardent desire, felt in his body no pain of the wound, so much did he rejoice in the salvation of his soul. Then did the saint behold the wounded foot of the king, and imprinted on it the sign of the cross, and blessed it, and healed the wound, and, full of the prophetic spirit, thus prophesied he unto the king, The blood of any king of thy race who shall sit on thy throne shall never be shed, save of one alone. And the inhabitants of this region assert the prophecy to have been proved by undeniable truth, inasmuch as history recordeth not one king of all his posterity, even to the 10th generation, to have been slain, but only one. And there remained in that place a tablet of stone, whereon the saint is said to have celebrated the holy mysteries, and it is called by the Irish LXXIV, that is, the stone of St. Patrick, and on this stone, for reverence of him, the kings of Castle are wont to be crowned and to be advanced unto the throne of their kingdom. Chapter 75. How Dercardius and his companions were destroyed. And thence the saint speeded unto Momonia, that out of that place he might pluck the thorns and the branches of error which, being planted by the craft of the old enemy, had flourished there, and sow in their stead the spiritual harvest. And a certain man of Comdothan, named Murinus, freely received him, and made unto him and the companions of his journey a great supper. And the saint deemed right to impart the spiritual and eternal food unto those who had prepared for him the food which was perishing and earthly. And during supper, while the saint labored to fill their minds with the word of life, a certain wicked man named Dercardius approached, and with rude and importunate speech, nay, even with clamour, wearying the ears of the saint, afflicting his mind, and stopping his mouth, demanded of him food. The which the saint not having at hand, blushed, and took unkindly the irreverence that prevented him from preaching. But a certain man named Nesson, who beheld how the just man's spirit was vexed, offered unto him a ram, which the saint bade him give to the bold importuner. This receiving, Dercardius returned to his companions, boasting that by his importunity he had penetrated the stony heart of Patrick, even as the continual dropping of water weareth out a stone. And they slay the ram, and dress and eat it. And while the meat was yet in their mouths the anger of God came on them, and suddenly avenged his servant, for the meat turned to instant poison, and destroyed them all, wherein are we sufficiently admonished not to offend the servants of God, lest we offend the Almighty himself, who will protect and defend them in the time of their trouble. Chapter 76. Of the quarrel of the two brothers. The blessed Patrick, as the angel of peace, announcing by the blood of Christ that peace which passeth all understanding, journeyed through Siaragus. And as he journeyed, he beheld two brothers named Bibradius and Locradius, who, their father having then lately been buried, were dividing the inheritance, and they at first disputed with their tongues, and at length they attacked each other very fiercely. And when each brandished the sword unto the death of the other, the saint feared exceedingly, lest even in his sight the crime of fratricide should happen. Therefore unto the pity of these unpitying men did he address his heart, unto prayer his mouth, unto blessing his hand, and making their arms immovable as wood or as stone, he stayed them in the air. And they, beholding themselves thus miraculously prevented, ceased from the fury of their conceived sin, and, at the bidding of the saint telling good tidings of peace and preaching salvation, returned unto the mutual kindness of brotherly love. Then he, the brothers being appeased, and his blessing being given unto them, restored the power of their arms, and they offered him for the building of a church the field wherein was worked this miracle. Chapter 77. 14,000 men are miraculously refreshed with the meat of 5 animals. And after that Patrick, the illustrious worker of miracles, had fortified with his most holy admonitions the inhabitants of Momonia, whom he had already filled with the faith, he turned to visit the northern part of the island, the territories of the sons of Nael, that he might convert or confirm the dwellers therein. And the aforementioned King Oengus, with 12 of his tributary kings, and other of the chiefs who were subject unto him, followed the saint with 14,000 men, desiring to be fed with the bread of life and of understanding. And when they came unto the river Brosnick, where Triumus the bishop, by birth a Roman, companion unto St. Patrick in his journey and his labours, dwelled in a place called Choibeach, he desired to refresh all this multitude. Therefore he first fed them all with spiritual food, and then bade them sit down unto supper. And Triumus had 1 cow, by the milk of which he was wont to be sustained, and he caused her to be slain for their repast. But what was this one among so many? Then Patrick, the beloved of the Lord, addressed a prayer unto heaven, and behold, 2 stags issued from one part of the wood, and 2 boars issued from another part, and came unto him as tamed and domestic. And these, giving thanks unto the Most High Giver, he in like manner bade to be killed, and, having blessed, he placed before the multitude. And all the people ate, and were abundantly filled, and the remnants, that nothing might be lost, were gathered up. Thus with the flesh of 5 animals did Patrick most plenteously feed 14,000 men in the name of him who, with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, did feed 4,000. For he said, He who believeth in me, the works that I do, these shall he do, and greater than these, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. And these miracles differ not, though they vary in their number, for each was worked of the Lord, this in himself, that in his servant. Nevertheless, on the morrow was found in that field a cow like unto the one that was killed and eaten, and it was given unto Priamus, that he might be nourished of her milk. And the rumour went forth among very many, affirming this to have been the same cow revived by Saint Patrick. We, however, say that nothing is impossible unto God, but that this was done we neither deny nor assert. Chapter 78. 19 men are raised by Saint Patrick from the dead. But to these wonderful acts succeed yet more wonderful, and evidently show in his saint the wonderful God, for the next miracle deserveth even higher admiration. And as Patrick was one day preaching eternal punishment to those who resisted the commands of God, and the reward of eternal life to those who obeyed, his words were confirmed by the argument of an unheard miracle. For, lest any scruple of doubt should arise in their hearts, he revived, in the sight of all, 19 men who had been dead and buried in their graves, one of whom, named Fotis, had lain in his narrow house for the space of 10 years. And all these related the pains which they had suffered, and with one voice declared that the God whom Patrick preached was the true and the living God. Then the king Oengus and all his people, beholding these things, glorified the God who is glorious in his saints, wonderful in his majesty, and eminent in his miracles, such as are never seen on earth, and they honored Patrick as the priest of the high God and his peculiar apostle. And each returned unto his home, saying, This day we have beheld a miracle. And they who had been revived were by Patrick baptized, and, professing a penitent life, they took on them the monastic habit, and, abiding with the blessed Priamus, they remained in holiness and in faith even to their lives' end. Chapter 79. The king's daughter becomes a nun. And Patrick came unto the country of Nail, wherein reigned a king named Echu, and he had one beloved daughter named Cinia, whom he intended at a fitting time to give in fitting marriage. And the damsel unfolded to the saint her father's purpose, and he exhorted her to deserve the reward of virginity even an hundredfold. Therefore, rejecting worldly nuptials, she determined to offer herself an undefiled offering unto her celestial spouse, and to cherish him in her heart. And the king, beholding her thus steadily to preserve her virgin purity, called unto him the saint, and thus he spake, I had determined that my daughter should continue unto me a long descending progeny for the confirmation of my kingdom and the solace of mine age, but the succession is cut off, and mine hope is defeated by thee. If, therefore, thou wilt promise unto me the heavenly kingdom, yet not compel me unwillingly to receive baptism, my daughter shall become the servant of thy God, even as thou hast exhorted her, otherwise will I not be stopped of my desire, nor shall thy preaching prevail. And the saint, confiding in, and committing all unto, the Lord, faithfully promised what the king required. Then the damsel, being veiled and consecrated, and serving the Lord in virginity and in the exercise of all other virtues, brought by her example many unto his devotion, and during her life and after her death she was renowned by divers miracles. And the saint commended her unto the care of the holy virgin Sethubarus, who first of all the women of Ireland had received from him the veil, and to whom, being placed over the monastery of Drumduchan, with a great multitude of virgins serving Christ, the saint himself addressed an exhortatory epistle. And in this monastery did Cinia abide, until at length with many holy virgins she rested there in the Lord. Chapter 80. The King Echu is raised from death. And after some time had passed, the king Echu was reduced to the bed of sickness, and when he perceived that his strength failed, and the day of his death approached, he sent a messenger to call Saint Patrick unto him. And he strictly forbade that his body should be buried until the arrival of the saint, for that he had promised unto him the heavenly kingdom, and especially, that the king desired to receive from him the heavenly baptism. Thus saying, he expired, and his body was kept for the space of 1 day and 1 night unburied, in expectation of the saint. And he, then abiding in the monastery of Sabalum, which was distant 2 days' journey, knew in the spirit of the king's death, and, ere the messenger could arrive, had made ready for the journey. And the saint came, and mourned over the king, especially for that he had died without baptism. Therefore prayed he unto the Lord, and loosed him from the bonds of double death, and forthwith instructed in the faith him restored unto life, and baptized him, and bade him that for the edification of the people and for the proof of his preaching he should relate what he had seen of the pains of the wicked and of the joys of the just. And he told unto them many wonders, and there among that in that heavenly country he had beheld the place which Patrick had promised unto him, but, because he was not then baptized, he could not enter therein, and so at the prayers of the saint his body was revived. Then the saint inquired of him whether would he longer live in this world, or instantly go into that place which was prepared for him, and he answered that all the power, all the riches, all the delights of the whole world, were to him but as the emptiest smoke compared with those celestial joys which he had proved with the eye of faith. But I entreat, said he, that I may be loosed from the body of this death, and delivered instantly from this prison house, for earnestly I desire to be dissolved and to be with Christ. Thus having said, he received the Eucharist, and, falling asleep in the Lord, went unto the place of immortality.